Okay, this video is in continuation to our previous video titled Introduction to Python Telegram Bot. If you have not watched that video, I recommend you to first watch that introduction video, which will help you to understand the bot structure we are going to use in all our Python Telegram bot projects. So in the comment section of that introduction video, a user named LukeStep11 asked how he can create a Telegram bot that will send custom replies depending on the message it receives from the user. So if the user sends hi to a bot, the bot should reply with the message hello, and so on. So let's try to implement this feature in our hello bot from the introduction video. To implement this feature, the first thing we need is to create a dictionary that will contain all these messages that our bot is going to use. So let's go to the settings.py file and create a new variable, custom replies. This will be a dictionary that will contain the key and value pair as the message that we are going to receive from the user and the reply that the bot should send. So let's add our first message that will be hi. When the bot receives the text hi, it will reply with the text hello. Let's add few more messages. Now we have custom replies dictionary ready. Let's go back to our main.py. To implement the replies feature, we need to make two changes in our bot. The first change is to create a function that will listen to the new messages from the user and send a reply depending on the text we have set in our custom replies dictionary. Our second objective is to create a new handler that will filter the messages received in private chat only, as we do not want our bot to reply to channels or groups. So we will filter the messages in the private chats only and then send those messages to our callback function we will create here. So let's create a callback function. You can give any name to your callback function, that does not really matter. All the callback functions in Python Telegram bot accepts two arguments, which is the update and the context object. So now we have a custom reply function that will receive the update and the context object from the handler here. Now we need to extract the message text from this update object. So the message text is inside the attribute update dot. Let's create a new variable, message text. This update object contains an attribute called effective message. So this gets the effective message we are working with. So, and that effective message contains another attribute called text, which contains the text of that message. Now we have the message text received from the user. Now we need to check if this message text exists in our custom replies keys section. So let's get the reply we want to send from this dictionary. The reply underscore text, we are creating a new variable, reply underscore text. Let's import that uh, custom replies dictionary from the settings file. Now we will get the custom replies dot get the message text. So if this message text is high, we will get this value when we will run this code. And if this message text is something else that does not yet exist in this dictionary, then we will get none. So this reply text can be either a valid reply or can be a none object. So we will check if reply underscore text exists, then we will send a reply to the user with the reply text message. So let's send a reply update dot message dot reply underscore text. This function accepts the text as the argument that will be our reply text. If the message text does not exist in our custom replies dictionary, this reply text will be none, and when we will run the if condition, this will fail and the bot will not send any reply. Now we need to create a handler for this custom reply function. For this new handler, we will import a message handler updater.dispatcher, and we will add a new handler to our dispatcher object, which will be a message handler. Our message handler, let's go back to the documentation of the Python Telegram bot. Let's search for the message handler here. So the message handler accepts few arguments. The first one is the filters and second one is the callback function. So we need to find a way to filter only the messages received in a private chat. So let's go to the documentation of the filters and see if we have a filter to filter only the private messages. These are different filters available inside the filter module. We have a filter for command, filter for contact, document. Okay, so here's a filter for only the private messages. So let's use this filter inside our message handler. We need to import the filter class from telegram.ext and add our callback function to this new handler. So what this handler does is it filters all the messages. This handler handles all the messages received by our bot and then filters only the private messages received and then send it to the custom reply callback function. Now our callback function extracts the message text from the update object, then it tries to get the reply text that we want to send using our custom reply dictionary, If we have a reply text in this dictionary, then we will reply with the reply text. So let's try to run this bot and see if it works. So the first message in our custom reply is hi, and the bot replied with the text hello. You can also test the second message, and it replies with I am fine. Let's send something random, and because this random text does not exist in our custom reply dictionary, the bot does not send any reply. So that's how you can uh, create the bot that will send custom replies depending on the message it receives from the user. Now the another comment we have received on that introduction video is regarding a to-do bot in which the user can create to-dos, and then he can view the list of the to-dos and edit and delete button to edit or delete the to-do. So let's try to create this to-do bot as well. In our project, let's create a new file called to-do bot. Let's copy the code from our previous hello bot, as our structure is structure will going to remain same for all our bot. Now we don't need these functions, and we don't need this handler as well. The import statements and the updater functions will remain same for most of the bot. Now in this to-do bot, our first objective is to create a function. Let user create to-dos function view list of to-dos, and we also need to create handlers for this function. So let's create our first function, create to do, and all the functions, if you remember, accepts two arguments. The first one is the update object, and the second one is the context. So now to create the to do, the user will send a command as /to do, and he will send some text that we will use as the title of that to do. So let's get the message text from the received message object. Now we have the message text. Let's create a handler that will handle the new private messages from the user and send that update to this callback function. Uh, we will use command handler for the creation part. The command will be new to create a new to do, and it will call the function create to do. So when the user sends the command new, uh, the bot will create a new to do for him. Let's also create a function for the function for help. in the help command, we will return all the available commands our bot accepts. So let's write the commands available here. The first command will be new, and then the user have to enter a name for the to do. The next command will be list to show list of to-dos. That's it. So let's also create a handler that will handle the command help and send that update to this callback function. This will be a command handler which will match hello command and send that update to our help function. Our next function will be the function that will show the list of the to-dos to the user. So let's create the function show to-do list. Let's just print the update. And also we'll also need to create a handler that will match the list command and call this function updater.dispatcher.add handler command handler list. We'll call this function. So we have all the three command handler ready and the functions ready. Now we need to find a way to store the data, the to-dos created by the user, somewhere in the database or somewhere inside this library. So let's check the documentation if we have something to store the data in Python Telegram bot. So let's go to the documentation or the wiki page actually. They have a nice index here for different important points. Let's see. Okay, so we have a documentation on storing the data with this library. Sometimes you need to temporarily store some information about the current user or chat for later use. An example of this would be a survey bot that asks the user a series of questions one after another and saves them to your database when all the answers are collected. So that's something we need for this to-do bot, in which user will create the list of to-dos, and we need to store that data somewhere in our database and then return the list of to-dos when the user calls the list command. So we have different types of data already inbuilt in this library. The first one is the bot data, user data, and the chat data. So we'll probably need the user data object for this bot, as all the to-dos will be uniquely linked to a particular user. So let's take a look at this point, making your bot persistent. There's a section called what do I need to change in the bot to make my bot persistent. So this is the instructions that we need to make. We need to change in our bot so that our bot will start storing those bot data, chat data and the user data. The first thing we need is to create a persistence file using the pickle persistence object from this telegram.ext module. So let's copy this line and paste it before the updater. We need to import this pickle persistence from the telegram.ext module. So we now have a persistence object that we need to pass to the updater. So let's add the argument persistence to our updater object and pass the persistence object we have created. This is enough to make user data, bot data, and chat data persistent. So by adding these two small changes, now our bot is ready to store these three types of data, and this will be stored in the bot even after the reboots. Now, when the user sends the new command, we receive this message text inside our create todo function. Now we need to split the command and the to-do title. So if the user sends /new and he will write the title of the to-do, we need to split, we will receive a message like this. We need to split it at this part. So we have our command separate and the name separately. So let's remove this new and space part. To-do underscore title is equals to message text dot replace. We need to replace the command part and a space, and rest of the text will be our to-do title. So we have the to-do title. Now let's add this new to-do to the user data. The user data exists inside the context object, and to add new objects to the context object, we need to use this format context.user underscore data. Let's add a key that will be the message ID of this message that we have received. So let's also create a variable message ID update dot effective message dot message underscore ID. So we are using the message ID as the key of the to do, because all the message IDs are unique, so we won't have any clashing keys for our to do list. So the first message, we are adding a new to do in our context object. The key of that to do will be the message ID, and we will add a new dictionary that will have title as the to do title we have created here. We also need a boolean field that will track if the to do is completed. By default it will be false, and after adding the new to do, we will reply to the user that a new to do has been created. Now we have stored the new to do in the context object, and this context object is basically available in all the functions. So we can now create our list to do function, and when the user sends the list command, we will reply with the list of to dos available with us. So let's add a reply function. The first thing we need is to create a message that we want to reply. So let's add a text. Now we will get the user data from the context object and loop for all the items of to-dos available inside this user data and add them to the text. For key value in context data dot user data dot items, we will add the value part, that is the to-do title, to the text. Let's send this text to the user when he sends the list command. Let's test the bot we have created so far if all our functions and the handlers are working fine. Right click on the project and run this bot. Now let's send our first command, help. We have not received any replies, so our code must have some error. Let's take a look at the handler for the help function. The command we have used here is hello. Let's change that to help and stop our bot and run it again. Now we will send the help command again. This time the bot replies with the text we have added in the help callback function. So now we can try to create a new to-do using this new command. Okay, so our bot has received an exception. Let's check what this exception has to say. So this exception tells us about there is an error in our project at line 9 inside the function create to do. So let's go to the line 9. There's an error in the replace function. So I have forgot to add the text with which we want to replace this new command. So we want to replace this command with an empty string. So we will be left out with only the to do title that the user have sent us. So let's stop the bot and run it again and paste the same command to create a new to do. This time this create to do function worked and it has created a new to do to our list. Now let's call the list command which will show us the list of to dos we have. So let's send the list command. Okay, we have again received an error which says that we have an error at line 18. So here's our line 18. It says that we can only concatenate str and not dictionary. So the value we are adding here is actually a dictionary and not a string. So we need to change this value and get the title part from the dictionary, which is a string. We can also add the status of the to do as since this completed option is a boolean, we need to convert it to a string so we can concatenate this value. Let's get the status of the to do by using this dictionary completed key. Let's stop the bot and run it again. Now we will send the list command again, and this time our bot shows the list of to-dos. The first to-do and the status is false, means it's not yet completed. Now we need to add a function to mark this to-do as completed or uncompleted. So we need to read the Teleton documentation and find the documentation for the buttons. Okay, so now we need to find a way to add some inline keys that we will use to toggle the status of this to-dos. So let's go back to the Python Telegram bot documentation, actually the GitHub page, and let's open this example folder here. Inside the example, we have some examples of the inline keyboard bot. In this example, we can see that this example is importing two classes, which is the inline keyboard button and the inline keyboard markup from the Telegram module to create this keyboard. So let's copy this line and paste it here. Now, to create this keyboard, this is the format the library uses. First, it creates a list of the inline buttons that we want to use. The inline button accepts two arguments. The first one is the text, which will be the text shown on the button, and the second argument is the callback data that we will use to track which to do this button is for. And then that all these keyboard buttons is wrapped inside the inline keyboard markup class, which we will finally send with our update.reply.text function as an argument reply underscore markup. So let's create let's create inline buttons for all our to-dos here. So for all the items in our to-do list, let's first create an empty variable as keyboard, and for all the items we will append a input inline keyboard button inside this keyboard. So to append a new element in a list, the format in Python is the list.append. Now we will append a new list, which will be a inline keyboard button that accepts the first argument as text. That will be the title of our to do. So let's get the title from the value dictionary, and we will also pass a callback data that will be the ID of this to do. So our key is actually the ID of this to do. So let's pass this key. So now we are adding one button for each of the elements in this to-do list. Now let's also add a space here. To see this, there's no space with the title and the status fields. So we have added a space here to make it look better. Now let's wrap this keyboard object inside inline keyboard markup and send it with our reply function as reply markup argument. Let's stop our bot and run it again. So now we have these buttons for each of the to do in our list. Now let's add a callback function for this button. So when this button is pressed, the status of this to do will change from false to true and so on. Let's first add an emoji here. So the button will also show the status of the to do as an emoji. So let's create a new variable called status emo, and this status emoji will be a tick mark this status emoji will be a tick mark if value so if the this value dictionary has the completed field as true, this status emoji will be the tick mark sign, and otherwise it will be a cross sign. Now let's add this emoji to our button text. Actually, let's create a new variable called title, which will be the value title plus the emoji space plus status emoji. Now we will use this title variable wherever we want to show the title. So we want to show this title of this emoji in the button and also in the text part. We can replace this value as well as this status with title variable. Now let's stop it and run it again. Now we have some better looking buttons with the status of the to do. Now let's add a callback function to handle the clicks on this button. So if you look at the handler part, this example bot uses a callback query handler to handle the clicks on that button. So we will add a similar handler here. And to use the callback query handler, we first need to import that handler from our telegram.txt submodule. So let's import callback query handler and add the handler inside our new handler. And this callback query handler accepts only one argument, which is the callback function. You can find this information in the Python documentation here by searching for the callback query handler. So let's first create a callback function for this query handler. Let's just print the update and add this callback function to our callback query handler. Now every time we press this button, our updater will receive an update, and it will look for the handler which will handle the callback queries. The first tree handler does not handle the callback queries, so the update will reach to this handler, and then it will be sent to this callback function button click. So let's stop our bot and run and check if this prints the update when we click this button. Okay, so you can see that this button this function prints the updates we have received by the callback query. Now we need to add some code inside this callback function to change the status of this to do, and also edit the message to update the new status. Let's take a look at the example again. Inside this callback function, it's getting the query object from the update object. So let's do the same thing here. This callback query object is actually the query which contains the query ID, the chat instance, the message, and some more data. The callback data we have passed with the button is available as query.data, and you can see here query.data. So let's get the status of the to do. So let's first get the to do ID from this query.data. So this is the to do ID, and now we can change the status of our to do by getting the to do object from the context.userdata dot get this to do ID. We actually need to change the data, so we'll use this format. We are changing the value, the completed status, to new value. Let's first get the current status of this to do. So context.userdata to do ID completed, and now we are changing the status or the current status with the new status. So when if the current status is not completed, then when we click the button it should change to completed, and when it's completed we can also click it again and mark it as uncompleted. So to do that we can use a simple format, not current status. What this does is what this line does is it acts as a switch. So whatever the current status is, it will convert it to the opposite of that current status. So if the status was false, the not false will convert it to true, and similarly if the status was true, the not true will become false. So our status is updated. Now we need to edit this message with the new data. To do that, we need to again create all the text and this keyboard from here. So we can copy the code and edit the updated message. Not sure if that's the right way to edit a message. Okay, so we can edit the message with query.edit message text. So let's use this code to edit the message. The edit message text accept or text option, and it should probably accept the reply markup as well. You can search the documentation if you want to read more. So let's send the text and the reply markup. Okay, so let's run the bot again and check if our new button works. Now let's click on this button, and on clicking on this button we have received a new exception which says that this to-do ID does not exist in our to-do list. So the reason this happens is because the callback data we send with our button is received back by this library as a string. But when we stored this to-do, we stored that message as an integer. So let's convert this to-do ID. Is this to-do ID? So let's convert this to-do ID to integer by using the int function in Python. And now let's run this bot again and see if it works. Okay, so the to-do is now marked as done and our message was edited and updated. The next thing we need to do is we do not want to have the same code at two places. We do not want to repeat ourselves. So let's create a new function that will generate this text and these buttons of our to-do, which we can use at both the places. So let's create a new function, generate to-do message. This will accept the context argument which contains our to-do list data. And now let's copy paste all this code here. Now every place in our code we want to get the to-do list and the buttons, we will simply call this function and pass it the context argument, and this function will return us the text and the reply markup. So let's get the text and the reply markup by calling this generate to-do message and pass it the context object we have. And we can use the same code here to avoid repetition of code and keep our code base simple and short. Now let's test if this update works. Let's send the list command. We've got the list of the to-dos, and click on this button which should change the status of the to-do. So everything is working fine. Now let's add a response that that will say the user that your update has been processed. So let's add a function here, query.answer, which will accept the text to-do status updated. Now let's stop this bot and run it again. Now when you click this button, the status of this to-do will change, and you will also receive an pop-up here saying that the to-do status has been updated. Let's click on this button. Okay, we have received this pop-up here. Let's change it again. So everything is working fine with our new to-do bot. So that's how you create a to-do bot with the Python Telegram bot library. That's it for this video. If you want to learn creating any other bots, you can leave a comment in this video, and we will try to create a new tutorial for that specific bot.